What is going on, guys? Brent here. This is going to be a little bit of a different video. We're not at the racetrack, we're not racing today, and there's not going to be any racing footage in this video. Instead, I want to do something a little more informative. As you can see, our last race got rained out, but I wanted to put something out. And the whole point of making this channel was I kind of wanted it to be informative for what it's like to race on a budget, race as cheap as it could be. So today, we're going to discuss how much it costs to get into racing and race in the four-cylinder mini stock class that I run in. Now, my class is one of the cheapest classes you can get into for any type of competitive racing. It's also one of the best types of racing if you are on a shoestring budget and you want to do it as a hobby, or if you want to do it, really competitively. It's the best way to do it without absolutely breaking the bank. So, how much is that exactly? Is it something that you can afford? Today we're going to find that out, so stick around. Obviously, if you're going to start racing, the first thing you want to do before you buy anything, is to see what racetracks are in your area. Not only what racetracks are in your area, what are the rules and what are the classes of that racetrack. The last thing you want to do is buy a race car, find out that your local racetrack does not even race the kind of car that you got. So make sure that you are going to be buying something that you can race in your area, and it's going to be at a racetrack where you can afford to go to and from almost every weekend in the summer months. That being said, and the first thing you want to buy before you even get anywhere near the racetrack is a reliable transportation that is going to be able to get you to and from the racetrack, but also be able to pull your race car and your trailer as well as any other equipment that you bring. Assuming you're already on a pickup truck, because pickup truck prices can range from used to new. I drive a 2003 F-150, so it's not the most expensive truck in the world, but your usual truck maintenance, and it is my daily driver. So do research in the area how much a pickup truck costs. But in terms of trailers, you got two choices for a trailer. You can do an open trailer, which is what we have, or you can do an enclosed trailer. If you decide to go the route of an open trailer, you got two options. You can buy it used or you can buy it new. Now, of course, with a new trailer, you can finance it, or you can buy, you can go buy a used trailer, or you can buy a new one outright. For a used trailer, you can sometimes find really good trailers on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or whatever for about $1,500, and they can range anywhere from $1,500 roughly. Sometimes you get lucky and they're a little bit lower than that. They can go as much as $4,000 and up. Obviously, these are not concrete prices. These are prices in my area because that's the only thing I really have expertise on. You're going to need that first before you even buy a race car, because we gotta get the race car home one way or another. Which brings us to the next topic: how much does it cost to buy a race car? With our cars, the four-cylinder mini stocks, there's many different ways you can go about it. There's front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive. There's a lot of the rear-wheel drive cars are tube chassis cars, like a stock car, like a modified and up. Then you have your typical mini stock, like what I have, which was a street legal car at one point turned into a dirt track race car. You want to look in your rules at your local track and figure out what you can and cannot race there. Because again, many times you can buy a car that's legal at one track, take it to a different racetrack because the car you bought is nowhere near where you live. You want to race at your local track, but the rules are completely different, and that car was legal there but not legal here. So you want to look at your rules, really going to dictate what price range you could have. On a typical scale for the most common sanctioning bodies in the US, you're going to look at, for a four-cylinder mini stock, you're going to look about $2,000 to $5,000. That's for a car that's race ready. Obviously, you can always go the route of buying a Chevy Cavalier or a Cobalt or a Honda and gutting it and turn it into a race car yourself. Depending on how much equipment you have and what resources you have, it could be cheaper than this to do that route. But it really depends on where you're at, your situation, what access you have to welders and the roll bars and that kind of stuff. So If you're in a boat where that's not access to you and you want to buy a car that's race ready, be ready to spend at minimum $2,000 per car that's ready to go to the racetrack. Now, you have your trailer, you've got your car. What do you got to spend money on next? Maybe it's tires and wheels and all that, which you will have to spend money on, but first you got another thing you got to buy first. You got to make sure that you can legally race at that racetrack, which means you got to have a license to race there. Race car drivers have licenses. If you did not know this, there are registration licenses that you would have to have, and your sanctioning body, more often than not, does require you to have one of these licenses. The price range for your license is going to depend on what area you live in and also what sanctioning body your track goes under. So, the most common ones is going to be IMCA, which this year in 2025 for the mini stock class, their license is $75 for the year. USRA is $60. SCDRA, which is a series that races in the South, and I believe they also have some in the Northeast as well, but it's mainly in the South. They are $75. And the other one that is the most common around here, or the most common one in general, is WISSOTA, and they are $90 to race. Now, keep in mind, this is usually a once a year expense. So you'll pay this at the beginning of the year, and you should be good all through that entire season. But you also got to remember, the next year you'll have to renew that license. You have to pay for it. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down. More often they go up. I'm actually running out of room, so I'm going to erase this. Hopefully you got this, got your notes. It's gone. The next thing you want to pay for, and this is the most important one of all of them, arguably more important than the car itself, your safety equipment. Now, of course, with your safety equipment, you're going to have a range of things. You're going to want a fire suit. Now, a fire suit can range from $100 and up. It depends on the quality of it, the brand. There's so many factors that will depend on it, but if you want to go for a cheap budget fire suit that is legal at almost every racetrack, and it will keep you safe in the instance of an injury, $100 is your minimum. Next up is your helmet. Now, there are some helmets that are a little bit on the cheaper side that are SA 2015 and up, which means, so pretty much every racetrack in 2025 is going to be at least SA 2015. I'm assuming within the next couple of years, it's going to be changed into at minimum SA 2020. But as of the ranking of this video, SA 2015 is the most common minimum one. In fact, that's what my helmet is, and I will have to buy a new helmet here pretty soon for that. You're going to be looking at least $80 for a helmet. Again, that's the low end. That is the cheapest you would be able to pay for a new one. Barring buying a used one for sure, which I would never recommend buying used safety equipment. It's not a good idea. Don't do it if you can help it. Next up is your Hans or neck support. Now I use a Zamp S series that is a little bit on the lower side, but is still very good harness. It hooks onto my helmet. It slips under my 5-point harness, and it keeps it anchored down. So if I got into a crash, it's going to restrict my head movement forward. That's the whole point of it. The Zamp series is probably the most efficient price one, the cheapest one you can get, and they're still going to cost you about $200. There are more reputable, bigger brands such as Hans, Simpsons, and they're going to be $300 to $400 to $500, all the way up to $1,000 for those. So this is going to be a very expensive piece, but it is super important for in the event of being in a wreck. Next up is your 5-point harness. This is your belts that keep you anchored into the car. For a 5-point harness, you should be spending no less than $80. there are some good reputable brands that do have in this price range. For example, Speedway Motors, which is a reputable brand for all forms of racing, they sell 5-point harnesses that are on the more budget side, and they're great harnesses. One thing you want to keep in mind with your 5-point harness is they do have expiration dates. Your date on your harness is within a couple years of buying it, and you have to make sure that those harnesses are replaced before that expiration date. Otherwise, your car is deemed unsafe, and you could actually get disqualified for it. You want to make sure that you buy new harnesses. You never want to buy used ones because it could be frayed, it could be torn, and that could just lead to problems. Always buy a new harness, and it actually works out for the best when you buy a new harness because that means you'll have the most life out of it before they do have to be replaced. You usually have about 2 years on it. I bought my harness that I have in the car at the end of last racing season. Actually, no, I take that back. It was actually July of last racing season because they expired in August, and now they're good till, I believe, October of 2026. So I got some life on these ones, at least for the end of this season, and pretty much the end of next racing season. So I should be good in these harnesses, but keep that in mind that you will only get a couple years out of it, despite you paying almost $100 on it. So just be ready for that. The last piece I'm going to put under safety equipment is your receiver. Now, what a receiver is, if you don't know, is it's a little radio that is got a one-way channel. You cannot speak to it. It's not like a NASCAR where you have a little button on your steering wheel and can talk to your spotter or crew chief. We don't have those anyway, but it's so you can hear from the tower. That way they can get you lined up, they get you formed up, they'll let you know when there's a caution out, they'll let you know when the race is over. More often than not, you're in a place on the racetrack where you won't be able to see the flag stand, and sometimes, depending on the track, you won't even be able to see a light. So that receiver is important because they will tell you, caution, 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 checker flag, and at the end of a race, they're going to tell you what cars are going to tech or weighing, or depending on what track, depending on your track, how they do their post-race protocol. It's your direction, it's your directory for what's going on the track and around you. So it's super important to have a receiver. Your receiver is going to typically cost, at minimum, $85. Now, this is a radio. It's not like a safety equipment where if you get into a crash, it's going to protect you. So of all these things on here, if you have to buy anything used, your receiver is what you want it to be used, because that thing is not going to make a difference if you have one or not if you're getting into a wreck. If you do buy a used one, ensure it does work, because it saves you a headache in the future, and it saves the racetrack, the track officials a headache, because they'll be able to talk to you. Next thing we're going to discuss is tires and wheels. Now, again, you want to look at your track rules to figure out what you can and can't have. The options vary between like DOT tires versus Hoosier racing tires. Sometimes you're allowed to run either or. Sometimes you only allow one. Sometimes you only allow the other. You also want to be able to ensure that you are allowed beadlocks if that's a route you want to go down. And you want to make sure that you don't have to have a specific type of wheel. And that all depends on your track rules. In my case, we run DOT tires. So what I do is I go and buy Douglas tires from Walmart. They're the cheapest street tires you can get. They have a good amount of tread on them. They're perfectly fine, and they're perfect for racing because you could buy plenty of them in a decent quantity at once because they're a good price. For a wheel and tire combination, so one wheel and one tire, you should be expected to pay at minimum $100 per wheel and tire. So that's $400 for all four sides. You're going to be spending about $50 to $60 for the tire and about $50 for a wheel, depending on if you buy a new one or a used one. Sometimes you get wheels a little bit cheaper from like salvage yards and such, but assuming you buy one from buying a new OEM spec wheel for your car and getting that shipped to your house, it's going to be about $50 per wheel. So about $100 per wheel and tire. That's $400 per set on the car. I would recommend having having your 4 tires on there, and then also having one more set, or at least at the very least 2 more tires, to get you by on a race weekend. So on a race weekend, you should have about $600 worth of tires with you at the racetrack. The next one we're going to talk about is basic maintenance, how much it costs to maintain the car on a regular basis. You know, assuming your normal oil changes, your transmission fluids, your power steering fluid if you have it, that kind of stuff. In our case, we run regular motor oil that our car takes. Ours, and in our case, we're a Honda, it's 5W20. So we do, 5W20 oil, and I'll do a standard OEM Honda oil filter. It's about $40 to $60. Depending on how hard you drive the car, depending on your car setup, and depending on what you use in the car, the amount of times that you're going to be spending this to do your maintenance is going to differ. I do this maybe 2 to 3 times a season. As you can see, our season goes from April to October, so once a month or so, maybe even a little bit less, depending on other instances, like maybe if I get into an incident and stuff, I'm gonna obviously do all that stuff while that car is down. But on this, assuming there's no accidents, nothing like that, about once a month I would do an oil change on the car. And that's purely off of preference, what you prefer to do and what you think is best for your car. The next step is your travel expenses. Okay, so you got your trailer already, you got your race car, you got your equipment in the car, car's ready to go, you got your license, you have everything all ready to go. It is now race day, it is time to go racing. How much is it going to cost to get you from your driveway to that racetrack, onto the track, and then back home? So you're going to want to calculate how much fuel you're going to need going to and from the racetrack. You're going to want to calculate amenities for your pit crew. So you're going to want to have, maybe a cooler with some drinks in there, so we don't get so you can get overly hot and get dehydrated at the racetrack, because, we're racing in the summer months. It's going to get hot. Plenty of water. You're going to have ice for that. Maybe some food. You want to make sure you have all this stuff in mind, ready to go, and either purchased on the way to the racetrack or before you go to the racetrack, because you don't want to be at the racetrack in the pits and say, oh crap, I forgot this, or oh crap, we don't have water. And if that's the case, then you're just going to be suffering throughout the night. Don't get heat exhaustion. That stuff, that is brutal. So the main thing you're going to want to factor is how much it's going to cost in fuel for you. For me personally, I pay between $60 to $80 in fuel going to and from the racetrack. That's not including driver entry, which I'll get into in a minute. This is just how much it costs me to go in my pickup truck pulling the trailer. God, remember, you're going to have a lot worse fuel mileage when you're pulling a trailer and pulling a race car with that truck. About $60 to $80 in a weekend. That's going to and from the racetrack, going from my house here in Great Bend, Kansas, to Park City at 81 Speedway, and then taking that truck back home to Great Bend, Kansas. Again, this is going to differ greatly depending on how close you are to your racetrack, depending on how good a fuel mileage your pickup truck is, pulling a trailer, all the many factors on that. But for me personally, $60 to $80. Now, you got everything you need. You got your race car, you got your trailer, you got your safety equipment, you got your food, your water, your tires, you got everything you need ready to go. You are ready to go to the racetrack. You get to the racetrack, then you go to the pits. Then how much is it going to cost for you to get into those pits and get on the racetrack? Well, driver entry. Again, it's going to depend on your racetrack. Every racetrack has different entries. Every racetrack has different protocols for their pits. Some tracks will have a driver entry plus a pit pass you have to pay for. Sometimes you got to pay for a car entry plus a driver entry plus a pit pass. Sometimes you even got to pay for parking. It depends on your racetrack. It completely depends on how they do theirs. For us at 81 Speedway, for a driver entry, which includes the car entry and our pit pass, for me, it cost me $50. Before I even get to the racetrack, When I pull up to there at that racetrack and I go to the little ticket booth, which is actually where we get our prize money at the end of the night, I'm paying them $50 to even get into the pits. Now that $50 is going to cover my ability to race that night. And that also covers another thing that you may not consider, and that is your transponder rental. A transponder rental is 10 of that $50. So it's actually $40 for your entry, $10 for transponder rental. You can buy a transponder yourself. They're going to be about $100 to $200 depending on your brand. And when that happens, you don't have to pay the $10 for the transponder rental. You just have to tell them, you have to, one, make sure it's charged before you leave the racetrack, because the last thing you want is to buy a transponder, not charge it, go to the racetrack, realize it's dead, and then still pay $10 for a transponder rental anyway. You have to go there. When you sign in, you do your entry. They'll ask, do you have a transponder? If you do have your transponder, they will get that number off on the transponder. They will get you calibrated into their system, and you'll be good to go. They'll be able to track you using your own transponder. I don't personally have one. I've had the opportunity to buy one, and I just haven't. But that is an option. In the long run, depending on how long you race, that will eventually pay for itself, because you're paying that one time, and that's knocking $10 off of that $50. So you're only paying $40 after 10 races. If you say you only paid $100 for it, after 10 races, you've already made your money. But depending, if you're just starting racing, you don't have your transponder, didn't buy one, expect to pay $50 if you're going to 81 Speedway. And again, that's depending on your racetrack. Every racetrack is different on how much they pay, and their protocol to get in the pits is very different. That's about everything I can think of in terms of what you need to do to get ready to start racing. My rule of thumb going to a racetrack is I like to have no less than $200 in spending money. Every time I get paid, every single paycheck I get, I'll take $200 out of that paycheck, immediately put it in savings, and that is going towards our race that very next weekend. So, for example, I get paid every 1st and 15th at my job. On the 1st, I'm going to get paid. I'm going to take $200 off that paycheck from the 1st, is going to go directly into savings, and that $200 is going to be used to the 3rd. In this case, I'm actually lucky. We had a rain out, so I have that $200 already in there. So if something comes up, say I don't get paid on the 1st, which is just a couple days before race day, I do have a backup on that. The off-season is a great opportunity for you to start building money up, having it savings. That way you have some of that extra insurance money, that extra reserve on hand. So when opening week comes up, if something does come up and you do have to tap into your savings, hopefully you'll have that racing money in there still, so you can still get to the racetrack. But anyway, I'm going to wrap up the video here. Hopefully you learned something from this. I feel like I was mostly rambling in this video. Obviously, these prices are going to depend on, it's totally going to depend on where you're at, your area. Obviously, places there's going to be a higher cost of living. That's going to mean that everything there is a lot more expensive compared to where it is here, where it's a little bit cheaper. Sometimes there's places that's cheaper than here even, but I like to think that this is a pretty low cost of living location, so maybe my price is a little bit lower than you expect. Do a lot of research and figure out in your area specifically how much it costs. Go to racetracks, talk to other drivers, and pick their brain a little bit. They are going to be your greatest assets if you're looking to get into racing. One of the absolute best things you can do is buying a pit pass, going to a racetrack, and just talking to those guys, talking to the drivers that race in the class that you want to race in, because they're going to have way better information than me on YouTube, who can only go off of what it's like in central Kansas. If you live in Maine, if you live in California, if you live in Florida, obviously these prices may not even apply to you at all. This video may be nothing for you. So go to your racetrack, talk to your local drivers, and actually have them tell you how much it costs, because in most cases, if they're not going to give you any secrets into, making their car faster, they'll be willing to tell you how much it costs to get into it, because racing is expensive. We all know it. I'm sure everyone that watches this video knows that it's expensive. But anyway, I'm going to end the video off there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something from this video. If you do, make sure you leave a like. Make sure you subscribe. We got more racing coming up. We got a race on the 3rd, barring another rainout. We should be racing that weekend, so I'm excited to get racing content back on this channel, because I feel like missing these last couple weeks has been brutal, not being able to get a video out for you guys. And so I look forward to being able to race this coming weekend. We'll have another video out for there, and hopefully we get a little bit better than 7th in points this time. So we'll see what happens. Stay tuned on the channel to see where we go from here in this racing season, and we'll see what happens. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.